Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here on Friday, June 13th, Friday the 13th. Happy birthday to my father-in-law, Paul. Shout out. Today we're looking at some more PFF rankings. Now that minicamp is officially in the books, it is going to be a lot of lists, a lot of rankings, a lot of prognosticating, looking ahead between now and the start of training camp, which is going to be about 5.5 weeks, maybe 6 weeks out from today. And so that's where we're at. That's where we're at in the offseason. Kind of the real dead period in the NFL calendar, if one exists. But we're looking at the Jaguars guards and center in the PFF rankings. They rank every position, the top 32 players at each position in the NFL. And the reason we're not looking at just guard specifically or just center specifically is because these three positions, left guard, center, and right guard, they tie in together so heavily. I mean, they're so dependent on each other. A lot of times they're blocking the same guy, left guard and center, or right guard and center, or they're passing a game off to each other. They're working in unison to zone block, to trap, whatever, so many different scenarios in which these players depend on each other. So we're going to talk about it as a whole. And we're going to start at guard, where the Jaguars currently have Ezra Cleveland at left guard, Patrick McCary at right guard, and Wyatt Milam comes in as a day 2 pick, maybe competes with Ezra Cleveland. Reason I would say he would be competing with Ezra Cleveland and not Patrick McCary, Cleveland was signed by the previous regime. He does have experience with the Jaguars offensive line coach. At least they were both in Minnesota at times, right? So like they know each other, or they know a lot of the same people. And Sean Surratt, he was very complimentary of Ezra Cleveland. But the point is, the Jaguars' current regime did not sign Ezra Cleveland. They did draft Wyatt Milam, and they did sign Patrick McCary. So that's kind of where that comes from. But the Jaguars, when you look at the PFF rankings in the top 32, there's only one guard. And when you look at the guard position, there's essentially 64 starters in the NFL. 32 at left guard, 32 at right guard. So if you're in the top 32, that means you're in the top half of the league according to PFF, right? According to the way they're looking at things. So the only Jaguar that comes in at guard in the top 32 is Patrick McCary, who comes in at 28. So PFF views him as a top half of the league starting guard. And at 28, this is what they have to say about him. Although injuries have held McCary back throughout his career, he managed to string together his first full season in 2024, logging more than 1,100 snaps in his final season in Baltimore. While McCary projects to play guard in Jacksonville, his value is in his versatility. He has played center, guard, and tackle in his career while routinely earning solid marks as a pass protector. Yeah, so that is true. Versatility has been amazing, outstanding for Patrick McCary, literally playing every position on the offensive line. But I don't think the Jaguars are paying $13 million a year to Patrick McCary for his versatility alone. They're paying for him to start for them this year at right guard. Could that shift in the future? Yeah, I definitely think it could, depending on how they put the roster together. And that is a nice, a nice piece to have where like you could say, well, he's going to start for us this year at right guard, but depending on how we handle next offseason, maybe he's starting somewhere else, right? So that is a nice aspect to it. And he's going to be 28 years old later this year. So in the prime of his career, still a couple years away from turning 30. I think he's a very good football player. I think his physicality is obvious. He is a pretty good pass protector overall. What is interesting about this, Brandon Sheriff, who is a free agent, is ranked by PFF at 19. And I've said it, throughout the offseason. I think Brandon Sheriff is a more talented player than Patrick McCary. He's also a lot older, does not have as fresh of legs. He's 33, going to be 34 by the end of the season. It would be nice to me if he was still here. Not, him over McCary, but if they were like both in the building, that would be pretty cool. I think he's going to sign somewhere to start, obviously, at some point this offseason. If there's an injury, whatever it may be, that's what I would expect. But when you look at their pass protection ability, I think they're both solid. I think Brandon Sheriff gives you a lot more consistency. And the numbers do need to be contextualized between McCary and Sheriff, because Sheriff has been in an offense the last several years where the average time to throw is extremely quick, right? Between Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson and this offense, they get the ball out quickly. Obviously, Doug no longer here. I still think it's going to be an offense that gets the ball out fairly quickly. So that'll be good for whoever's in the lineup, right? When it comes to your stats and your pressures allowed and all that, if you're getting rid of the ball quickly, you're not giving up as many pressures. McCary has played in Baltimore, where they don't get rid of the ball as quickly, and there's certainly a lot more extended plays with Lamar Jackson. So obviously the pressure numbers might not be as impressive, but you need to add the context of this is a guy who's been blocking for one of the most athletic quarterbacks, who's going to take a lot of risks, and not risks with the football down the field, but risks in terms of evading pressure, getting out of the pocket, holding onto the ball for longer, and trying to make a play than what Brandon Sheriff has dealt with in Jacksonville. There's no doubt about that. But last year, playing mostly left guard, he did start 3 times at right tackle, Patrick McCary. He gave up 32 pressures. And that is in, 18 games plus the 2 playoff games they were in. But in 9 of those 18 games, he gave up at least 2 pressures. Again, context. Blocking for Lamar Jackson, not the same as blocking for Trevor Lawrence. Offense is not the same. But Brandon Sheriff, he only gave up 17 pressures all year. His pass pro efficiency, much higher, and not a very penalized player. Whereas you look at Patrick McCary and you see penalties really heavily in 2024. A lot of those did come in a 3-4 game span where he was heavily penalized, but still 14 penalties last year for Patrick McCary versus 2 for Brandon Sheriff. So I'm not trying to throw cold water at all on the excitement about the Jaguars offensive line, interior offensive line, because that's where they made a lot of moves, right? Bring in Robert Hainsey at center. We'll talk about him as well. You bring in Patrick McCary. You draft Wyatt Milam. People are excited. Not throwing cold water on this at all, because I think he's a good player. I just want to illustrate, I don't think that the numbers are as stark. I don't think the difference in their level of play is as stark as the numbers might suggest. But I do think Brandon Sheriff is a more consistent pass protector, even at this point in his career, than Patrick McCary is. That's all I will say about that. I think McCary brings a little bit more nastiness. Maybe that's a product of where he's been playing, right? The Jaguars in general just weren't a very nasty team on offense with Doug Peterson and Press Taylor coaching, right? But the Ravens, that's one of their, calling cards is, being tough, physical, strain, grit. The Jaguars' current staff, Liam Cohen and company, they want more of that. And Patrick McCary does bring that. He's a pretty good player. So he's going to be in the starting lineup, and he ranks at 28 overall in the guard rankings. Ezra Cleveland does not rank in the top 32 for PFF, and I would probably have him in the top 32. Now, I'm not like offended in any way that he's not, but I think there's some names in here that I'd rather have Ezra Cleveland over. I will say he's probably in their top 40 if they did like an extended or an honorable mention. I think he would be up there. It's neither here nor there. I think that Ezra Cleveland showed last year he can be tough and physical and strain. I think last year he was among the interior offensive linemen for the Jaguars. He was clearly the best run blocker and the best in terms of just finishing plays. There's some inconsistency in pass protection, but I still think solid player. I'm fine with him in the starting lineup. I don't think he's like an elevator, but I think he's fine. I think Patrick McCary and Ezra Cleveland more often than not, in more games than not, are going to get the job done for you. Then we get to center. And he's the one that, brings it all together. And that's Robert Hainsey. And he comes in on PFF's list of top centers at 23 overall. And this is what they have to say. After losing his starting spot with the Buccaneers to Graham Barton, Hainsey signed a 3-year deal with the Jaguars following his former offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen. While we haven't seen much of Hainsey over the past year, he did show flashes on a small sample size, posting a 73.3 PFF overall grade. That should be a positive step toward a return to form in Jacksonville. I like Hainsey. We've talked about him. I think he's smart. I think like McCary and like Cleveland, he is tough and physical and brings the grit and the strain and the finish. I think he's very explosive in a straight line, explosive in a phone booth. I think he's got some decent strength. Don't think that he has like the best anchor ever, which a lot of centers don't have a great anchor. But, he is top heavy in his build. There's no question about that. But there's definitely some positives that he brings to the table. Now, he's replacing Mitch Morse, who retired. And similar situation, in between Morse and comparing him to Hainsey. Hainsey, like McCary, who the Jaguars both brought in, these guys are more of the tough fighters, finish through the whistle type of guys than what you had in Sheriff and Morse. And again, maybe that's a product of where they come from. Maybe that's a product of the offenses they were in, the coaching, right? But, Morse had one of his worst seasons last year, and I think it's clear that he's retired, right? Was not in his prime last year. Whereas you look at Robert Hainsey, he is definitely in his prime. And McCary is as well. Cleveland too. So you have a younger, nastier, feistier group. And I think that's going to help in the run game. I do think it's going to help in the run game. I think Liam Cohen's blocking schemes and just the coaching in general going to help a lot in the run game as well. I think, the fact that you have Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, De'Ami Brown, etc. is going to help the run game. Teams are going to have a heck of a time deciding what they're trying to do to defend your offense, in my opinion, especially with Liam Cohen dialing it up. But overall, I don't think that they're a better pass protecting group than they were last year. In fact, I think they're probably worse. Now, can coaching make it look better? Probably. Can some youthful legs make it look a little better? Probably. Not comparing it to last year at this point, but just seeing what I think interior offensive line of Cleveland / Milam, Hainsey, and McCary can be this year. I think they can be like middle of the pack interior offensive line, which would be huge. I think they can be middle of the pack in both run blocking and pass protection, which obviously the run blocking has been subpar in Jacksonville. The pass protection has been decent. Those numbers have been aided by the fact that they get the ball out quickly. I think that when this group goes up against a team like, let's say Philly, which obviously Philly's not on their schedule, but let's take a peek at the schedule. Like I said, I think most weeks this group will be good enough to get the job done and to execute the offense. I think there's going to be some weeks where it's a bloodbath on the interior and it's very difficult. I think you look at Kansas City and they can move Chris Jones wherever the heck they want. He's a problem for everyone. But him and Omar Norman Lott together, I think could present issues for the Jaguars. I think Seattle could present issues for the Jaguars. Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner with the Rams could present issues for the Jaguars interior. You look at Arizona, they added some guys as well. Tennessee with Jeffrey Simmons and Devondre Sweat. I think that's going to be when the Jaguars and Titans match up, that's going to be one of the keys to victory every time. Can you slow down Jeffrey Simmons and Devondre Sweat on the interior with the guys you have? You also got to factor in pass protection. Can LeQuint Allen earn that role as that top pass protecting back and get in there and help out in that regard as well, because you didn't have any pass protection from your backs last year. Quinnen Williams going to be a problem when you take on the Colts with DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart. They can present issues. I don't think the Jaguars face necessarily like a murderer's row of interior defensive lines this year, but there's going to be times where I think it can be an issue. And if the Jaguars are in position to make the playoffs, to make a run, I think January football, late January football, middle January football, that's going to be when this interior offensive line is really tested in a big way. And I'm not sure how it's going to go because, like I said, I think they can be middle of the road in this offense, in this scheme as a group. I would love to see, in a vacuum, Patrick McCary starting is fine. Robert Hainsey starting is fine. Ezra Cleveland starting is fine. I would love one of those positions to have a better player. Like if you had two of those guys starting plus a top 10 player at one of those positions, that would make you feel a lot better. Or at least it would make me feel a lot better. I think you have a floor here. I think you need a ceiling. Can Wyatt Milan become one of those types of guys? Can he be a top 10 guard in the league? Or, at least a above average guard in the league? That would be huge. That would be huge for them. I think he has the potential to do it. I still don't see him as a potential top 5, top 8 guard in all likelihood. I think the Jaguars could use, and it's not going to happen this year, but I think over the next couple years, finding someone who can be a true difference maker on the interior of the offensive line could be really big. And hey, maybe Robert Hainsey, Patrick McCary, Ezra Cleveland, Wyatt Milan, one of these guys or multiple of these guys in this Liam Cohen offense can play at a much higher level than what we've seen in the past more consistently. But I think that there's going to be some struggles against some of the better interior defensive lines in football. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.